Hello everybody, Ben here and welcome back to another video. In today's video, I'm reviewing the Bachmann Baldwin class 1012D. The version I got was 391-029 Baldwin class 1012D Glyn Valley Tramway, and it has a next 18 DCC decoder socket. The model is packaged in the standard green and red Bachmann 009 box. I often find that the plastic insert stays inside, and then you can see we've got instructions here talking about oiling and fitting details and all that sort of thing. It includes removing it and obviously fitting DCC decoder if you want to do that and all that sort of thing. It's quite a not the easiest loco to do, but it's not impossible. Obviously there's about accessories and running in and everything there you can see. Also in the package is these etched builder's plates. Presumably these are Baldwin Locomotive Works plates. There is already printed ones fitted to the loco as printed on the loco as standard, but I think these look a lot better than the printed ones. So you can fit them, they're in the packet, so you can fit them if you want to. Taking it out of the packaging, you can see here the Glyn Valley Tramway livery Bachmann Baldwin 1012D. I think it looks quite good. Starting at the front of the model, we have, I think, what looks like a re-railing bar, a buffer beam. Got these sort of handrails supporting the boiler. There's also these steps, as well as these sort of rivets and attachments to the boiler on the front of the smoke box, as well as the smoke box and smoke box door itself. It looks a lot strange, presumably because it's American design. You can see there's nice lot of, presumably, rivets on that. And there's quite a lot of detail with this down at the cylinders as well. You can also see there's the nice lamp bracket, as well as the very small and fine handrails on the front of the tanks, as well as the tank filler caps. And you can see you've also got more rivets on the side of the tanks. Again, there's quite a lot of rivets on this model. You can also see there's two domes as well as the chimney, and the chimney I think is made of metal. It feels quite sort of cold when you touch it. You've also got the dome. I presume one's a steam dome and possibly the other's a sand dome. There's also this large rod here, and you can see there is a bit of a glue mark as it's glued into the dome. And there's also various other boiler bands and things attaching the tank to the boiler. There's also a tap looking thing here, which reminds me a lot of either the engine, and that is the same on the other side as well. And there's also a few bits of pipe work going between the tanks and the actual cab of the loco. However, the ones on this side doesn't look quite connected, and I think that makes it a bit loose if you touch it, but often I don't think you handle the model there very often. But I think the whole boiler area and everything like that looks very good, and you can see there's the windows there as well, with the rivets on the front of the cab, as well as obviously the sides of the cab there with the curved cab roof, or curved sort of cab sheets I think it is, and the handrails for the actual cab, as well as all the various cab detail around the firebox. There is the glazed windows. It just slightly annoys me they have one big plastic piece connecting it rather than two separate bits, but I don't think it's too noticeable, especially if you put some crew in. I don't think you notice it too much at all. But the cab, it's kind of hard to see in, especially with this version with the back windows, but it is quite a nice detailed cab. And you can see how also there is the back panel here, which you can tell it's a separate piece of the tooling, because you can sort of see that it doesn't quite properly actually fit onto the model. There's sort of air seen through it a few times, but you can also see there's quite a lot of rivets here on the roof as well, and also on the back of the cab, along with the lamp iron as well. And the cab itself, there's a lot of detail in there, and you can also see the coal load and that sort of thing. So I think it's quite a good cab. It's not the best cab. I think the Bachmann Penryn Quarry Charles, for example, is a better cab, but I don't think this is a bad cab. On the back, there's a different shaped buffer boom, which is interesting. Various rivets, as well as what I believe is a re-railing bar. I'm not quite sure what it is, but it's an interesting thing. You can also see there's what I believe is a step for going into cabin. You can also see there's quite a lot of sort of spring detail and stuff around the firebox area. You can see an axle there, which slightly annoys me, but it's not too noticeable. And you can see how actually see-through this whole part of the sort of loco is. There's a lot of detail on top of the sort of gear train, and it's quite surprising how you can sort of just look through the tanks, and it's quite good in that sense. There is some holes and sort of screw holes, but I don't think it's too bad, and you're not usually at this low of an angle. You can also see how the wheels are set up, where there's a front bogie, and the other part of the front four-wheel bogie is actually connected to the 6 driving wheels, and you can see how complicated and sort of strange almost I find. There's the red on the buffer beam as well as the sort of white lining around it, and there's also the white and red lining of the Glyn Valley Tramway around the front of the tanks as well as the side, along with the nicely printed GVT with the yellow or goldy coloured text with the sort of shaded red. But you can see that's also on the other side as well, and the same lining around the cab as well, and the cab sides and back. You can see that the lining on the back of the cab, where it's a separate piece, doesn't quite line up, but it's not too noticeable. But when you see it, I just find you can't see it. But it's not the worst thing in the world. You can also see there the printed detail you can also see the printed detail inside the cab, as well as the printed detail of the builder's plate. You can sort of see, I think, Baldwin locomotive works on it. You can also see the tap there, as well as these sort of detail and the copper cap on the chimney. I don't think the copper paint looks too realistic. It looks almost more goldy to me, but it's not too bad. And overall, I think it's quite a good looking model. It's not bad, especially when you consider it's Bachmann's first 009 ready to run locomotive. Now we get onto the running of this loco. I find it's not the worst runner in the world, and it's not the best either. It's just a sort of okay loco. I don't think the crawl is necessarily the best, but it's quite good actually. But it sometimes does seem to sort of stall and isn't the best runner, and it sometimes I find gets stuck randomly, but it runs okay. And it can do decently slow sort of sustained speed, but it works definitely better at higher speeds. But then also I think it's geared a bit too fast, because I think the higher speeds are far too fast for a now-gauge loco. I don't think that's the correct speed for one of these. I think these usually would be running much, much slower. Obviously you don't have to use that, but I think Bachmann should have geared it to a lower speed, because I managed to derail it. You can see coming over this point work here, it works quite well, and it's not definitely the worst runner in the world, and it's quite good, I guess. And I find it's not exactly the most reliable. I think maybe obviously the track might be dirty, but even like the Bachmann Charles, that has less wheels, yeah, it often seems to run better. But generally, it runs quite well, I think. I think, however, though, it's not exactly the most powerful loco in the world, because even with what I would consider for 009, not exactly the most longest train in the world, and it's what pretty much all is, apart from the brake van, all ready to run rolling stock. Though I do admit the Corris Railway brake van at the end does add a lot of drag, but as you can see, and also the slate wagon as well. Then they aren't exactly the most free rolling, but they're not that bad. And even if I had, say, a ready to run brake van instead, you can see that it still doesn't work particularly well. And I don't think this is the most powerful loco in the world. Even though, say, a loco, again, like the Bachmann Premier Quarry Charles, that's about the same weight, maybe a little bit lighter, but yet it seems to be able to haul heavier trains. And I believe that's because all the weight of that loco is on the driving wheels, whereas this one isn't, because of the front bogie. And I think the front bogie is sort of taking quite a bit of the weight, maybe a bit more than it should do, but I'm not quite sure, and I don't know how I'd prove that. But this is on a curve. There is a very slight gradient around the castle castle tower, but it's not much. It's maybe a couple of pieces of card that just raise it up a bit, just to give it a bit of difference. I don't think it'd suffer that bad, but you can see here with not exactly the longest train. It's quite a long train, but not the longest. And I thought it'd be alright with that, but it isn't. So I find sometimes you have to fit it with shorter trains. But overall, it runs okay, but it often struggles on gradients with any sort of length train, so I'd suggest adding weight if you want to pull decent length trains. But for now, I'll let you see how this loco runs. Thank you for watching this video by me. Please like and subscribe and leave a comment down below with some video ideas or feedback. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.